Hello, boys and girls. Welcome back. Man, it's been a while. I missed seeing those bright faces sitting at those desks. Means a lot to have you back. Just looking over your um, British invasion projects, and so far so good. Really liking what I'm seeing from a lot of you guys. Okay, and I'll make sure I get back those grades to you as soon as I can. For now, I know uh, we did that project, but today we're just going to wrap up the British invasion and talk about a couple bands that I did not assign for you to take a look at. Um, but I hope you're doing well. Besides all that, we're pushing through here into May now, um, and we're trucking along. You guys are doing a great job. Just keep up the good work and keep your spirits high. I hope as the weather starts to get a little bit nicer here, as I'm recording this video, it's 80 degrees outside. So as soon as I'm done here, I'm gonna uh, head out to the garage gym, pop the door open there, maybe bring some of the weights and stuff outside to work out in the sun. It's good just to get outside, get that vitamin D flowing through your veins, and all kinds of stuff like that. But anyway, we're wrapping up the British invasion today, even though you already did your projects. But we can't have a history of rock class and not talk about these two bands that we're going to discuss today. And then after that, we will we'll get into the late 60s and into the 70s starting in our next class. Okay. So who should we talk about next? Who? Oh no. Who? The Who. That's who we're going to talk about. And actually, below in the links below, I'm going to link two different videos. One, you might not understand why I'm posting it. It's the famous comedy routine by the great Depression era comedy duo Abbott and Costello, Who's on First, where they're talking about a baseball team and the guy wants to know the players of the names on the team, and the guy who plays first base, his name is Who. So there's this whole thing, who's on first? Yes, and the guy gets all frustrated and stuff, right? So, but in the 90s, in my heyday, there was a little show called Tiny Toon Adventures. You may have heard of it. I'm not sure if it's on Netflix. If it is, you should. It's Mrs. Joseph just whispered that it's on Hulu. So if you have Hulu, you should check it out. And it's basically all the characters from Looney Tunes, which were big in the 50s and 60s. It's like baby versions of them, I guess you could say, or little kid versions of them, right? So of those characters like Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck and stuff. And they did this one particular routine where it wasn't who's on first, but it was at a big music festival, which resembles the Woodstock Music Festival of 1969. It resembles that quite well. And they're talking about who's on stage. Get it? And it's all about this. So I'm going to link the Abbott and Costello video and the Tiny Toons video with a Snappy and Slappy Squirrel talking about who's on stage. All right, so make sure you watch those. It's kind of funny. Kind of funny, though. All right, so let's talk about the Who. There they are. So this is a picture of them in 1965. From the left, we have John Entwistle on bass, one of the great bass players in all of rock and roll, really. Bass, for a lot of reasons, bass gets kind of the bassist gets kind of forgotten about. It's actually kind of a meme, kind of an inside joke between musicians about how the bass player always gets left out and forgotten about. But John Entwistle is really one of the best bassists in the history of rock and roll. Next to him, you have the lead singer, Roger Daltrey. Next to Roger, and kind of in the front sitting down there, that's the drummer Keith Moon. And then Next to him is the guitarist Pete Townsend, and we'll talk a little bit about supergroups and stuff when we get to Led Zeppelin in the 1970s. But the Who, for all intents and purposes, really is a supergroup. A supergroup is when you have every member of the band is like the best at their particular instrument, or like among the best, right? And we're talking like generationally. It's like Keith Moon will go down as one of the greatest drummers of all time, and they'll be talking about him in another like 200 years. They'll be talking about what a great drummer Keith Moon was, right? So the Who, and every member of the Who is like that. So this is a real super group. So the band was started by Pete Townsend and Roger Daltrey, and they're both the leader. Daltrey is the front man for sure, right? So he's the most like visible member. I mean, 99.9 times out of 100, the front man is going to be the lead singer, right? And that's the case, in this band. But Pete Townsend is just as much of a leader of the Who as Roger Daltrey is. He's one of the main, he's one of the main songwriters. He does sing from time to time on lead vocals, so he's a great musician as well. 1965, they had hit song I Can't Explain, but really the song that starts them off on a superstar trajectory is the song talking about my generation, okay? And I did stutter, but there's a reason why. I'm going to link the song below. Listen to the song and check it out. This is really emblematic of this generation. Now, I know you guys, Generation Z, you make fun of this generation all the time. You might not even know you make fun of them. But who are the young people driving the youth culture in 1965? What do you call them today? The boomers. They're the boomers. Okay, boomer. Okay, boomer, write me another rock song. Why don't you? Well, you have to understand, this is the groundbreaking culture. This is the youth culture of their day. This is them pushing the envelope as far as they can. Okay, and when you look at a song like My Generation, this is supposed to be emblematic of the youth culture as a whole. This song really does, in many ways, stand for what the youth culture really stood for back in the 1960s. I mean, and this is kind of a living for the now type of culture. Right? There's a line in the song, "Hope I die before I get old," right? I mean, you can take that whichever way you want, but this is, the one thing that's true about it is that you can say that this is them showing like, hey, we don't care what happens day to day. I only care right now about having fun with my friends. And, I don't want to become an old man like, these old fuddy-duddy people. Right, so this is the 60s generation. This is the boomers, okay? The Who were known for their wild antics, both on stage and off stage, and they might not have been the first group to ever do this, but they're the first group that's like well known for this, which is destroying their instruments on stage, okay? And again, that's just more of a kind of the wild, crazy, not thinking about the future, just doing what feels good now type of culture that they were pioneering, right? Because you might say, like, I really shouldn't destroy my guitar because it's going to cost me another couple $1,000s to get a new one. But they didn't care, okay? So, yeah. Before we talk about Tommy, I just want to mention also that one of the other links I'm going to show you below is The Who performing on the Smothered Brothers variety show. This is another show kind of like Ed Sullivan. And the Who did a performance of My Generation, actually, and then when they were finished, they were doing what they normally did, which was destroy their instruments after in their last song of their set. And Keith Moon did something kind of interesting. He said, "What if I was going to do the British accent, but I didn't. I don't know. Should I do the British accent? Oi, hey, mate, oi. What if I decided to put some firecrackers in me drum set there? Sorry, if you're British or if you have like family that's British, I am very sorry. I should not have done that. But I'm going to move on now. So he put firecrackers in his drum set, like dynamite, basically, right? This is something that he had done before, but he kind of upped the dosage this time, I guess you can say, and it was he just put this in his drum set and caused a huge explosion, which actually interrupted the TV signal for a split second. It also left Pete Townshend, who was standing in front of the drum set, deaf in one ear permanently. And Keith Moon himself actually got a cut on his arm because when it blew up, one of the cymbals of the drum went flying and sliced his arm up. So, maybe not his proudest moments, but it's kind of like in the spirit of rock and roll, right? That's very rock. It's a very rock thing to do. So I'm going to post that link below so you can check that out. Okay, and now let's get to Tommy. In 1969, they released Tommy, which is the first commercially successful rock opera. And if you don't know what a rock opera is, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's a narrative story, right, where different people play different characters. They have sets and costumes and stuff, right? The story progresses on stage, right, with all these different actors. Except where an opera would use classical music, a rock opera uses rock and roll. So I'm going to link below one of the most well-known songs from Tommy, which is called Pinball Wizard. And that's really what the rock opera is about. I don't want to give a synopsis of it here. If you're really interested, you can check it out for yourself. But basically, it's about this boy, Tommy, who in the movie version of the rock opera is played by Roger Daltrey. And Tommy you have to understand, this is an expression that was used back in those days to describe people who were like this, but he is deaf, dumb, and blind. Okay, that's the condition that he has. And I only bring that up because that's part of the lyrics of the song Pinball Wizard. That is, this deaf, dumb, and blind kid sure plays a mean pinball. And dumb, by the way, it's not dumb like stupid. Back in those days, I guess today we would say mute, right? But it just means he can't talk. Okay. Now, there's an album version of this, and when you go to see the Who live, even till this day, even though Roger Daltrey and Pete Townshend are the only living members right now, every once in a while they'll still do a live performance, and they'll do songs from Tommy, and Roger Daltrey will sing all the songs regardless of whether or not he played that character in the movie. But the version of Pinball Wizard I'm going to show you is from the movie version of Tommy that came out in the 70s, and the person who sings this song is actually, you probably have heard this performer before, it's a very young Elton John. So check out Elton John in the movie version of Tommy, who is like the former grandmaster of pinball before Tommy comes and kind of usurps him. So check that out. Okay, so in the 70s, The Who continued to make new music with the album Who's Next? And this is actually my personal favorite album of The Who's Next album. This has songs like Won't Get Fooled Again, and the song Baba O'Reilly, which is often mistitled as Teenage Wasteland. Everyone always says, oh, let's play Teenage Wasteland by The Who. That's not the name of the song, actually. It's like that, actually, it's called Baba O'Reilly. You guys know that meme? Of course you do. All right, so now let's talk about the Rolling Stones. Papa's the Rolling Stones. Rolling Stones actually get their name. Oh, it's taking a while. There they are. They get their name from a Muddy Waters song. They were big fans of Muddy Waters. And if you go back, if you ever, remember it's rated R, so I can't recommend it, fully, but maybe, if mom or dad maybe sits and watches it with you or watches it first, the great movie Cadillac Records, which is about the founding and rise and fall of the great Chess Records, right? We talked about Muddy Waters. In that movie, Muddy Waters actually, it's just a quick scene. It's not like a main part of the movie, but he does meet the Rolling Stones, and they say, "Oi, Muddy, we named our band after after one of your songs, the Rolling Stones." Right? So he's like, "Oh, that's cool," right? But this is a fun part of the movie. You can watch it if you want, I guess. All right, next. So here they are, the Rolling Stones in 1964. Okay, remember, so this is the same year that the Beatles performed on Ed Sullivan. We have from left to right, Bill Wyman, Mick Jagger, Brian Jones, Charlie Watts, and Keith Richards. All right, so let's go on. They are the most successful of the hard rock, blues-inspired British bands. A lot of times people kind of break themselves into camps. You're like Beatles people or you're Rolling Stones people. Like they argue over who's the best band, Beatles or Rolling Stones. It's the Rolling Stones, but they're actually. This is the Joseph just gave me a nasty look. They're actually, it's kind of a misnomer because they're really two very, very different bands. They sound nothing alike. They kind of when they first came to America in the mid '60s, they got a lot of comparisons because their looks were very similar. They had kind of that mop top type look, bowl cut type situation. But they're musically they could not be farther apart. So. I think you can like both bands equally, and that's not a cop-out. So in 1964, they had their first top 10 single, "Time Is On My Side." It's a great song. Check it out. 1965 came out. This is where we get one of their best-known hits ever, which is "Satisfaction." Okay. Keith Richards comes into his own as a guitarist. I forget. I'm not gonna say anything about Keith Richards. He's a very interesting guy, and there's a kind of a long-running meme that Keith Richards will outlive us all. And then the only thing left after a nuclear war will be cockroaches and Keith Richards. So. All right, along with Let's Spend the Night Together, Satisfaction, and that song were actually banned from airplay on many radio stations throughout the country, not all, but many, because of their very explicit lyrics, or nowadays we probably wouldn't even call them explicit, we would probably call them more implicit, right? But there is a lot of innuendo in these songs. That was enough for, people to say, hey, this is indecent. We don't want this to be, out there for public consumption, especially out there for young people. Nowadays, obviously, things are way different. I know the music you guys listen to. In 1968, they came out with another one of their big hits, "Sympathy for the Devil," which was, it can be argued, was purposely trying to offend their critics. They're like, all right, you're going to be offended by that? Well, here, let me throw this one out there for you to be offended at. All right, next let's talk about the album Exile on Main Street. But first, In 1969, the guitarist Brian Jones died. That was a big moment in the history of the group. The release of Let It Bleed, which is one of their best albums, put the group on par with the Beatles. Some songs off that album worth noting are Country Honk, Gimme Shelter, and You Can Always Get What You Want. But if you try sometimes, you might find you get what you need. In 1972, this is when they released Exile on Main Street. This is a double album. Nowadays, obviously, I would say probably 90% or more of your consumption of music is done digitally. How many syllables did I give that word? Digitally. Digitally. Yeah, I guess that's how you say it. Sorry, I had a little moment. But so guys don't really understand the appeal and just like the sheer joy when a band would come out with a double album, right? You go to the record store, you pick it up, it's 2 albums in one. The cover art was always epic. The liner notes, you would actually could take out the notes you could read. Sometimes it would have the lyrics of the song. Sometimes it would give you a little story about the recording of the album, what the songs were about, interviews, things like that. It was always a real treat whenever a band came out with a double album. This was no exception. Exile on Main Street. It was said that it marked the band's full maturity as rock and roll musicians. So I'll post some links there for you. And here is a more modern picture of the band. This is them in 2005. So literally 15 years ago. But as you can see, they are there. Now, my producer is telling me now that they actually just put out a new song, which I did not know about. So you should go check that out. And they're touring to this day, actually not in the past couple months, but as late as this past summer, they were on tour. And that was a tour which was a big deal because it was actually a tour that was postponed while Mick Jagger had like open heart surgery or something. So you can't keep these guys down, you know? They're they got to be in their 70s, if not their 80s for some of them. So yeah, so you can't keep these guys down. They keep on ticking, right? That's what rock and roll is all about. So yeah, we stand the Rolling Stones here at our house. Okay, so that's going to do it for today. Submit your notes. Listen to all of the listening examples. I think you'll like them, and I think some of them will even make you laugh, which we all know we could use these days. All right, until next time, I'll see you later.